Hello, I'm Nikki.
I'm Nick.
I'm Jade.
And we're the Project 2 NOVA Development Group.
After researching market trends in semester 1, this semester saw us focus on a new segment for the NOVA audience. Though the aims for NOVA and for ourselves were a little vague and there was no timeline set. We met with NOVA and discussed a project of recording a segment where we successfully made a deadline. However, our next meeting was pushed back and we started to see very early on a repeat of a long communication process that we had in semester 1. Despite this challenge, we eventually received feedback and we went into the studio to try again, and this gave us a great insight into the world of radio recording. Yep.
Over the past few months, we began developing and recording a news podcast for NOVA. In terms of our communication with NOVA, we found that scheduling was not needed as we were really working on the timeline that suited our supervisors. Because the time they had for us was so spread apart, we were able to remain on this schedule. However, I feel like for a media company and a business whose product is live, immediate and up-to-date, we never experienced the fast-paced working characteristics of radio that might be useful moving forward, as this would be similar to many entertainment industries.
The main challenge we really found as a group in developing this podcast was finding the proper balance between something too conversational and something too newsy. What NOVA really wanted from us was a podcast that was different to something like Hack on another network and really encapsulated NOVA's brand. However, due to our sort of lack of consistent feedback with NOVA project team, it sort of meant that we had to come up with what we thought would be right and then sort of send it off to them based on very little feedback. So one week it would be too newsy. One week it'd be too conversational, and then we'd send it back the next time and it would be the complete opposite again. So it was very hard to really find what NOVA wanted with the lack of feedback we got. Although we do feel like after everything we put forward to them, we pretty much found the centre of what they were after. And when it came to the style of news, it often differed between sort of what NOVA saw as news, what I saw as news, and what Nikki and Jade saw as news. For example, I grew up in the commercial radio sort of world, so I'm quite understood the stories that they were presenting, whereas Nikki and Jade, who were more Triple J style listeners, had a different idea of what news should be. So when it came to actually creating content for the podcast, it was always a little difficult just to try and find the right balance for the right story to present to them.
So one thing that was new for this project was the fact that we kind of started practicing announcing and used the NOVA studios. As this was something that I didn't really think would happen with the project to begin with. It was something that was definitely out of my comfort zone. There were certain other areas of radio that I really wanted to learn about during this experience. I thought I would be able to, but didn't really. But I still enjoyed the experience.
Yeah, I thought we would be doing more so production.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did end up being the talent, and obviously, well, not obviously, but I'd actually never had any experience in, talking on radio or talking in a studio. I found it really hard because sometimes you're sitting there and you're saying 100 times and you can't really quite get out what you want to say, and sometimes it's also really nervous. Sometimes, you get really nervous when you're talking in the studio and you don't really quite get out what you want to.
It was a great experience. To use Brisbane's #1 breakfast team studios was, it's a bit of a thrill, and for radio nerds like me, yeah, I absolutely loved it. It's very interesting to sort of find out, to be thrown into a situation and find out what the group dynamic was. And I think, as a tribute to how well our group worked through the semester, that actually transitioned its way into a radio show pretty well, which I think was, granted, I'm quite biased for sort of my love of the industry, but for you two, it was a real quick learning curve, and it definitely can be quite uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, I think the finished product sounded pretty good and we were quite happy with it.
And I think us as a group, with all the issues we had and the challenges in terms of communication, the dynamic and the communication that we had was really good, despite everything. We met regularly and we were always kind of enthusiastic about what we were going to do, even if we weren't sure.
I think it would have been good if we had a mentor who was available us to more often, because we were working with the head of NOVA.
Yeah, so Jay Walton, content director, program director of NOVA. We Dee, our integration supervisor, and also Scotty Coochman, who also one of the music supervisors there as well, sort of oversaw the project in little parts.
So it was difficult because they were so busy to get, and it was really hard to get time with them. It would have been good, if we had the chance to do it again, maybe to work with a mentor or work with someone else who was able to actually put more time into what we were doing.
A major turning point in the development of the podcast is when we changed our style of communication with Nova. When we were trying to schedule meetings constantly, it became very difficult when both our project leaders both took time off or meetings would fall through at the last minute. So we changed our mode of communication mainly to an email system, which works really well in getting quicker feedback on podcasts we'd send through. Although, however, it sort of took away from the real world experience that we were chasing with this project.
So towards the end of the subject and the end of the year, it felt like the whole team kind of was beginning to lack motivation because of the lack of guidance from Nova, and also it felt like a bit of a lack of initiative from us, maybe to go out and keep creating more content. So the lack of contact hours with Nova was definitely a factor which came into that. And it felt like towards the end of the year, we definitely weren't really learning much about radio as a whole compared to the start of the year, when everything kind of got dumped on us and we were learning so much and we got heaps of real experience. But towards the end, when we were just recording the podcast, we weren't getting much feedback. It felt a bit lackluster. So I would love to continue working within radio. Maybe not commercial radio, as I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I do like community radio and government funded radio. I find that I fit in a little bit better and my views kind of work a little bit more cohesively with those realms of radio. But I have definitely learned a lot with Nova. I've learned a lot.
This project for me was a really exciting opportunity. I'd worked in community and university radio before, and to work with an industry partner like Nova was really quite a dream come true, but to actually create content for them and do something that they asked was really, as I said, an exciting opportunity. And I feel from what we as a group were able to produce, it was able to show off a few of my own capabilities, but not only that, also the capabilities of us as a broadcasting group together. And look, it worked out really well for me in the end. I'm now working there casually and hoping to turn that into a future full-time opportunity. So for the sake of the QT pathway, it's worked out quite well so far. Fingers crossed that it keeps going. But yeah, it was a really just exciting chance to actually make something for a very well recognised brand, and granted the station is the #1 station in all of town. Just to be involved in that was quite a special opportunity.
So if there were students that were to undertake this project next year and Nova gave them the direction of producing or continuing on the news segment project, I feel like the students would definitely need to sit down with Nova at the very beginning and set a timeline and schedule, and block out key dates where they can meet and get more regular feedback and more contact hours. One thing that we kind of missed out on was actually going to Nova and working there and booking the rooms. We were told we had that opportunity, but we never really got around to it, just because once we'd left Nova, produced what we needed to and sent it in, there wasn't really much to do, and no real point in going into the studios to do anything. So I feel like that should definitely be something that is of a higher priority for next year as well. That just gives them the opportunity to be in the work environment of Nova. So we would all like to thank QUT and Nova for this opportunity. We certainly did learn a lot, and I think it was a good experience to have moving forward.
Just to be part of the #1 station in town and really show what QUT's partnership with an industry partner like this can do for someone who is incredibly interested in being involved in this field. It was just a really special experience.
Yeah, it's definitely taught me a lot about how to work in radio, and that's definitely a passion I'd like to pursue as well.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Now, this is probably what you've all been waiting for, so here is a sneak peek of the QT Nova What the Hex podcast. Enjoy.
Are you connecting?
The biggest stories while you work. This is What the Hex.
And that's the way it is.
On Nova.
8 of the 9 Australians locked up in Malaysia after stripping down to their swimmers at a Formula 1 race are now on their way home after they were released without conviction.
We are remorseful of our actions on that day.
We had no idea that our conduct would be deemed to be inappropriate, crass, or even downright offensive to the citizens of this country.
There's no excuse in saying, oh, this is just, Aussie behaviour, this is just prank that would be seen as a minor matter in Australia. You have to respect the laws of the country you're visiting.
I'm sexy and I know it.
That was Foreign Minister Julie Bishop there at the end. Well, the Budgie 9 can fly free after their charges were dropped in a Malaysian court this morning, but not without a serious, and excuse the pun, dressing down for the Malaysian judge. This all, of course, going down after Aussie Daniel Ricciardo's victory at the Malaysian Formula 1 Grand Prix. Now, let's not forget that these lads are private school and top university educated men, one of which is a senior staffer to Cabinet Minister Christopher Pyne. It really brings into question if we need to have a good hard look at ourselves to see how we as Australians behave ourselves overseas. We have such an sort of in-review looking out that every other country should relax, chill out a bit, and just sort of conform to our standards because we know how to run things. But at the same time, we can't act like this overseas. This is why I'll never go to Bali. And now we've gone over to Malaysia. Some of our best men, granted government staffers and whatnot, Sydney University educated boys who go, you know what? In a premeditated, let's drop trowel with Malaysian flag budgies on. They got it printed on, for God's sake. We know this wasn't an accident. This wasn't did someone miss Malaysian flag budgie memo? Oh, sorry, man. I only bought a Aussie flag once today. Get out, you bogan. We're doing something serious.
Yeah, it's a real statement, isn't it? The old Malaysian flag on the ass.
Everyone knows about smarttraveller.com. You know about smarttraveller.org, don't you? Yeah. Yep. Just read it. Just know some country. We know enough about Malaysia, and if we don't, then shame on a lot of us. But the fact that people can think, oh yeah, this is absolutely fine. This would go down. This would be such a laugh in Australia.
Yeah, really you should know about where you're going when you're going overseas, and instead of just being stupid and doing what you want, maybe you need to be a little bit more respectful, because that's probably what Australians don't have a lot of, is respect for other cultures, and that's probably seen a lot through media right now. Is that because we're so isolated from the countries overseas? Well, I guess it is just us, just floating by ourselves.
This is What the Hex.
They're good boys, and it happened.
They may be good boys, but are all Australians idiots overseas? We sent Nikki Johnson down to the streets.
Do you think Australians behave like idiots overseas, and if so, how so?
Yes. Keep
so?
your pants on. I think just cultural insensitivity everywhere. So even in Europe, I remember being at the casino in Monte Carlo and a Kentucky tour full of Australians came in, and my fellow Australian traveller and I separately were just mortified to see their behaviour. It was just so uncouth.
I've been to Bali. It put me off. I went to Bali before I moved to Australia and went, I don't know if I want to move to Australia anymore. And usually it's down to privilege and not understanding that they have privilege and thinking that they can behave at home as they are overseas when they should be respectful.
Very good call. Thank you.
Nikki Johnson there of that report. We've got plenty of activity on the What the Hex Twitter. AussieBoy23 says, I love this country. They should just learn to deal with it. Whereas Kenzie Carey, she disagrees. She says, I'm so ashamed to be Australian. I just pretend to be from somewhere else when I'm overseas. Well, it's polarising, but I think we might have a bit of a bad name for ourselves after this.